안녕하십니까. 저는 이스라엘 대사관 경제무역대표부 이민희 수석상무관입니다. 바쁘신 가운데에도 이스라엘 식품기술의 미래 온라인 세미나에 참석해 주신 분들께 감사 말씀드립니다. 세미나는 패널 토론을 시작으로 이스라엘 기업의 기술 소개가 있겠습니다. 그럼 주한이스라엘 대사관 대사님이신 아키바 토오르 대사님의 축사를 시작으로 온라인 세미나를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. We'll invite His Excellency Akiva Toru, Ambassador of Israel, for congratulatory greeting.
רוצה לשים עוד חולצה?
하였습니까?
איפה בני? איפה בני?
Oh, I hear someone.
בוא נשים יד. עוד יד. עוד יד בלי אוטו. הנה. יופי.
It's very nice to be here at the opening of this seminar in Israel and the future of food technology with an emphasis on cultured meat and alternative proteins. I just returned from Israel, and I have to say despite everything I knew, I was amazed at how quickly the country is opening up and how quickly with the vaccination drive, it's able to quickly get back to normality, and I'm very, very much hopeful that this will be the case in Korea as soon as possible. I also wanted to thank the Israel Economic and Trade Office of the Israel Embassy in Korea for organizing this terrific seminar. So a few thoughts. Today is Earth Day, April 22nd, and it's fantastic that we're doing this particular seminar, which really is at the nexus of green innovation and commercial applications and doing something nice for the planet Earth. As we all know, the commercial production of meat in today's world is unbelievably problematic for the environment in terms of methane gas and everything else it involves. And it's highly problematic from every ethical perspective as well. In the Jewish tradition, immediately after the creation of the heavens and the earth, God planted a garden. And the first instruction to humans were to work the garden and to keep it and to be careful with the garden. So there's a very strong ecological principle at the beginning, at the very start of all parts of the Jewish tradition. It's true that afterwards the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth, and that's more problematic, but let's stick with the first thing that God said to the humans, which was take care of the garden. In the rabbinic tradition, the Garden of Eden was a complete no-kill zone. And because there was not yet any cultured meat technology, that meant that all creatures in the garden, including lions, tigers, and bears, were all vegetarian. I'm trying to think, maybe this is one of the reasons that there are so many Israeli startups. There's such a preponderance of Israeli innovation and everything connected with this field of creating cultured meat. I did a count, and from what I can determine, a full 15%, 15% of the world's startups in the field of cultured meat were Israeli. If you're following international affairs, and you know that the Abraham Accords are opening up a new era of relations between Israel and Arab states in the Arabian Gulf. We think that this will spread. This means a greater movement of commerce and investment. It also means greater opportunities for Israel and Korea for all kinds of any kind of joint economic cooperation, which involves the advance of anything that we want to do in the Arabian Gulf. And cultured meat certainly applies. According to most Jewish authorities, cultured meat will be kosher. There's some questions if it has to be cultured from a kosher animal initially. Also, Islamic scholars believe that cultured meat is halal. And I can tell you this will probably be the first opportunity in the history of the world to consume a kosher cheeseburger. Because as you know, according to the kosher rules, we can't eat dairy with the flesh of an animal. But in the case of cultured meat, it will probably almost certainly be possible to have a kosher cheeseburger, which will have quite a market, I can tell you. I think that this field is a perfect field of cooperation between Israel and Korea in terms of investment, marketing, almost anything we can think of, because there's interest in meat substitutes in both our societies. And by working together, we can also find a way to make these products meet the palate and taste of both East Asia and West Asia and the rest of the West. So without further ado, I want to wish all the participants in this seminar a lot of good luck, a lot of mutual interest. I hope this technology races ahead, and I hope that this will be a field of deep cooperation between Israel and Korean innovation, marketers, and the business communities. Thanks very much.
So, hello everyone, and thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your greeting. My name is Yaniv Goldberg, and I'm the head of Israel Economic and Trade Office at the Israeli Embassy. And today, as the ambassador mentioned, is the April 22nd Earth Day, Global Earth Day, which one of its main pillars focuses on food and environment. Now, Israel is also looking to contribute to the mitigating of global climate in another important channel, which is mitigating the growing need of countries around the world to feed their population while reducing the very negative effects on climate change, animal welfare, environmental resources, food safety and sustainability, as well as health and sanitary. In particular, I would like to add that animal welfare growing concern is and should be a strong motivation of humankind to change our dietary habits, as well as to look into alternative solutions for acquiring the need for protein to sustain our health without causing harm and suffer to other species in our planet Earth. With that in mind, we decided to bring here to Korea some of the finest Israeli speakers and companies in this incredibly interesting field of alternative proteins and cultivated meat. And I would like to thank them for joining me today. So I will stop sharing the screen for a second, and then you will be able to see our panelists for today, and I will introduce them shortly, and then we will start right away. So Mr. Amir Zaidman is a VP of Business Development at the Kitchen Hub, an Israeli innovation hub focusing on food technologies and operating since 2015. The Kitchen belongs to Strauss, one of Israel's biggest and leading food companies, which has several global distribution channels. Mr. Nir Goldstein is a managing director of the Israeli office of the Good Food Institute. It's an NGO which is looking to support and nurture the ecosystem of better food products and technologies. And last but not least, Mr. Gary Brenner, who is with us now, is a VP of Product and Marketing Development at Aleph Farms, one of Israel's leading cultivated meat companies with a growing presence in Asian markets. So thank you all for joining us. I will start right away by asking you, and Amir, you will be the first to answer. I would like to ask you to tell us shortly about your background before serving at the Kitchen, and also share with us the vision and activities of the Kitchen right now. So please, Amir.
Thank you very much, Yaniv, and thank you, the Embassy and the Economic Mission to Seoul for organizing and inviting us to speak in this very important event. As you said, my name is Amir Zaidman. My personal background is that I've been involved in innovation and startup companies in Israel for the past 20 years or so. Before joining the establishment of the Kitchen in 2014, I was more involved in startups in the area of medical technologies, both on the investment side as well as on the startups themselves, the business development side of startup in medical technologies. I think that's about enough about myself. With regards to the kitchen, as you mentioned, we started at 2015, probably one of the first seed investors in the world that focused on food tech and changing the future of food. We support startups, and I would like to share a short video that basically talks about our vision and what it is that we're promoting and trying to do. Just one second, bear with me for one more minute. Let me share the screen. And
yes, it's just another day on planet Earth. You know how it goes. Billions of people are waking up, eating breakfast, exercising, working, living, loving, and going back to sleep. It's just another day on planet Earth. And to be honest, we're not going to change it. We're just cooking a healthier, safer, and more sustainable every day. So check out our menu. Plant-based eggs. Better juice with less sugar. Clean label vegan yogurt. All natural vanilla. Foods and soft drinks sweetened by natural proteins. Cultivated cow-free meat. Plant-based meat from only 5 ingredients with 20% proteins. Purified and safe drinking water. Safe antimicrobial surface coating. Energy snacks, free from added sugar. Delicious ready-to-cook vegetable dishes. Real milk products with no cows. So, are you hungry? Because with dozens of collaborations with international food giants, on-the-shelf products sold all around the world, and a pipeline of seed-stage companies, we're not just changing the everyday of tomorrow. We're changing the everyday today. The kitchen, doing good by doing food.
Okay, Amir, very nice.
That's it for my introduction. Thank you very much.
Very nice, Amir. Thank you so much. A very nice movie that also demonstrates some the activities of your portfolio companies. I would like to move to Nir. Also share with us what you did before joining the Good Food Institute and what are the visions and activities of your organization. Please, Nir.
Thank you, Yaniv. I'd like to also thank the ambassador, Tor, and the embassy itself. And wow, what a beautiful video by the kitchen. As to myself, before joining the Good Food Institute, I was a business strategy consultant. The Good Food Institute, GFI, we have a very simple vision. We want to see a world where alternative proteins are no longer alternative. But that's quite an ambitious vision, as you can imagine. We have several activities to support this vision. First, we are an international science-based non-profit organization promoting alternative protein, which is not only cultivated meat, but also plant-based meat and fermentation-based. GFI serves as a global expert and the hub for the alternative protein field. We have offices in the United States, Europe, Brazil, India, Israel, Singapore, Hong Kong, and I hope that sometime soon in Korea as well. What we do is that we work with governments, with the academic researchers, and the business sector to advance the field. And I would like to welcome you all to please see me as your contact person to the Israeli alternative protein sector. Thank you.
Very nice. Amir, I'm very proud to have a GFI branch in Israel. Thank you for that. And Gary, moving to you, maybe you can share your background as well as what Aleph Farm vision is and what are you doing to accomplish that?
My First of all, I want to thank also Ambassador Akiva Tor and yourself, Yaniv, for organizing this important event. For me personally, it's also a pleasure to return to Korea, so to speak. I've had the pleasure of visiting Korea and learning Korean culture through my business activities in previous years. And I look forward to coming back to you, visit you. My background is in public policy and in different activities outside of the food industry. I'm also a member of a kibbutz in Israel for many, many years, most of my life. And in the last 30 years, I've been involved with food industry, food ingredients, proteins, alternative proteins, and most recently with Aleph Farms in the development of the cultivated meat business. I joined Aleph in 2 years ago, this last month. I know about these technologies for a number of years and had quite an interaction with the Technion and Professor Shulamit Levenberg and with the kitchen in understanding these technologies before actually joining Aleph. And in the last 2 years, I've been working on both the product development side as well as new market development. And we see Asia and Korea definitely as an important part of this business development strategy. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. And we're moving on to the next question. And Nir, you will be first. I would like to ask you, what do you think are the main key issues and challenges facing the global ecosystem of the food and meat industry? How do you see the meat industry in 5 years from now? So Nir, please share with us your insights.
Yeah, a great question. And I think that, in the short term, in the next 5 years or so, the food industry, the meat industry should look at alternative proteins mostly as a growth engine. We all know the meat industry is expected to grow, very rapidly, especially in Asia, and actually double in size between 2005 to 2050. But the alternative protein industry will grow even more so in that period of time. And actually by 2030, most experts expect that about 10% of the global meat supply will become alternative protein. That translates into a market share of about $140 billion. With regards to your question, I think that in the longer term, the main challenge of the meat industry and the world as a whole is, of course, climate change. The meat industry causes multiple challenges to our sustainability, just like Ambassador Tor said earlier. First of all, it pollutes about 14.5% of greenhouse gas emission globally. It is also, the meat industry is the #1 cause worldwide for deforestation, for the pollution of fresh water and use of them, and for the use of antibiotics, causing antibiotic resistance, which will be the world's #1 cause of death, according to the UN, by 2050. We also have additional challenges in the food industry. For example, how are we going to feed 9.7 billion people by 2050 in a sustainable and efficient way? How are we going to ensure food security in a world with a growing number of risks, like the pandemic, like what we saw just now in the Suez Canal, and of course the climate effects? How are we going to prevent the next pandemic, and more? So I think alternative proteins have a bundle of solutions for all of these problems, and I expect them to grow very rapidly in the next decade.
Great, thanks, Nir. And moving to you, Gary, to hear your thoughts about the key issues, challenges, and how the industry is going to look like in 5-10 years from now.
First and foremost, food is a cultural experience. It's our basic need on one side, and it's on the other side, our tradition, how we are used to eat in our families, in our communities, in our countries. And so here, what we're trying to do, this panel and people like ourselves, is to take state-of-art science, state-of-art technologies, and bring them together with the food eating experience as people expect in each of their own countries. And therefore, we're talking about taste and affordability and safety and clean label and all kinds of expectations that consumers have. So when we're at the lab bench preparing these state-of-art food products, we have to take into consideration at all times also what people expect of us, what people want and will eat in the long term. And then we have to bring all of that, taking into consideration the macro goals and needs that Nir has mentioned, and come together and bring global solutions to local needs.
Great, thanks, Gary. And moving to you, Amir, I'm wondering if you had anything else to add to those kind of issues and challenges for the future.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief, just to add a very small point, because Nir covered, I think, the most of the the humanity challenges. I would say that us as humanity, we are used to rely on livestock as the main source of protein for feeding us and providing us with the proteins that we need. That's the meat, the chicken, the eggs, the dairy, and of course the seafood and fish. But we cannot handle, as on the planet, any additional livestock agriculture on all of those sectors. So things have to move on or change. On the other side, again, us as consumers, we are unwilling to compromise. The new consumer wants the taste, he wants the experience that Gary talked about. And I think when you talk about the challenges is, first of all, is the ability to produce those proteins that we need in other ways, which is not the traditional livestock farming, but on the other side is the bringing those products to the market in a way that consumers are willing to accept them, because they don't feel that they have to compromise on their eating experiences, and they can consume alternative proteins and have the same experience as they would with the regular protein products that they use today. Just as an example, a very juicy, tasty steak like Aleph Farms is producing.
Great, thank you, Amir. I'm moving on to the next question, and I would like to ask all of you to be quite brief and answer it in a nutshell. But Nir, you will be first also here. I'm thinking about the greatest strengths of the Israeli alternative protein industry, and I'm just trying to name them and to see what makes Israel a sweet spot of technology in that regard. So Nir, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I think 4 main reasons: academic research, innovation, government support, and pilot market. In terms of academic research, we have the capability to support this type of innovation. We have over 400 labs in Israel, which are experts in those specific fields. And Israel has an expertise in IP commercialization. We know how to take a groundbreaking research and make a company out of it. In terms of innovation, we all know Israel is named a startup nation. We have over 400 food tech startups in Israel. I think more than 50 alternative protein startups as of today in Israel, and I expect this number to double by 2022 to about 100. In terms of government support, we have the amazing Israeli Innovation Authority supporting the field, including, of course, the government incubators like the Kitchen, and we are working on the world's first national policy plan to support alternative proteins coming soon. And in terms of pilot market, I think Israel has everything it takes to launch a product first worldwide in this field. We are early adapters. And for example, Nestle declared Israel as their pilot market for those type of products.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Nir. Moving to you, Amir, what makes Israel a powerhouse of alternative proteins?
So I agree with Nir points, but I just want to, make a short adjustment. I think innovation, when Nir is mentioning innovation, it's mostly entrepreneurship, because there's innovation in many places around the world, but Israel is very, very strong in entrepreneurship. So we generate startups because people want to do new things. They want to set their own company. They want to bring a new dream to the market. And they're also very agile. So, 10 years ago, there were no startups in food tech, but this entrepreneurial spirit and mindset is changing and moving based on the needs of the market. And now the need is in the food supply chain. So a lot of entrepreneurs are coming into that space and saying, hey, the next big thing that I want to bring to the world is going to be something in food. It's going to tackle the problems of the protein markets and generate something with alternative proteins, because this cannot continue the current situation. Just to make this a very small point, and I agree on the other points that Nir mentioned.
Gary, you are actually representing a specific Israeli company, Aleph Farms, and I'm wondering what makes Aleph Farms as an Israeli company so successful? Maybe you can share.
We're still in a startup mode, but I think we're in the right direction to be very successful. First of all, I'm familiar with the Korean food tech community. And one of the things that I've learned is over the years that there's a lot of state-of-art technologies, particularly in Asia as well as in Korea, when it comes to food technologies. There's no question about that. And so if I can add one more part of the building block to what Nir and what Amir said, is that community is the key word. The community is the key word that makes Israel maybe different from the other countries and the other food technology sectors that I've seen in Asia, but also in Europe and the United States. Here we have a WhatsApp group for the food tech community, which comes to, I think today, maybe some 300 people. And they're communicating all the time. They're sharing ideas. We're looking for this, we're looking for that. Sometimes there's a lot of bravado of congratulations and great and wonderful. And that's a very, very important component of how to take all of these technologies forward. And I know that Aleph Farms, and even with some of the presenters that you're going to have later within the group of cultivated meat people, we are trying to help each other. We are competitors one day, maybe in one category sector of the business, but on the other, we're all have a common interest to push forward this very, very important cultivated meat category, so that we can feed people in the next generations.
Okay,
Can I add just one very short sentence, just to demonstrate, as I mentioned before, Aleph Farms is a great, great example of the entrepreneurship spirit and agility. We started Aleph Farms together with the entrepreneurs based on a research which was biomedical, tissue engineering for biomedical purposes. And then together with the team and the researchers, we said, hey, we can do that same thing for food and create, instead of heart muscle tissue, steak muscle tissues. And that's the way we started Aleph Farms, which is, as you mentioned, such a great startup company, is based on the ability to move from one field to another and to innovate in a new field. And that's a great example of the changes that I mentioned before.
That's totally true, Amir. And I just would like to add that I'm a member of this Food Tech WhatsApp group, and I really enjoy the discussions over there. One additional questions to all of you briefly, but this is a challenging one, and we will start with you, Amir. If you had to choose one Israeli company from the alternative protein segment that you think is the most interesting to look at, what would it be, and what is the reason for that?
So Aleph Farms is on this panel, so I'm not going to talk about them. But I do want to mention two companies very, very briefly. Since we're talking about alternative proteins, not only alternative meat, I want to mention Zero Egg, which is a company that is innovating in the field of alternative to eggs. So full egg applications, you can do anything like omelets or using their product for baking or for doing anything that you would do with regular egg. This is, of course, plant-based eggs, which I think is wonderful. It's a great startup to look at. I think it's one of the most promising one. And another one, which is in the area of alternative dairy, which is called Imagine Dairy, and is innovating in the field of, as I mentioned, alternative proteins for dairy, not plant-based, more recombinant protein, or if you want, like if Aleph is cell-based meat, this is more like cell-based dairy, milk. generating the actual milk protein, but without going through the cow and not doing the livestock agriculture that we mentioned before. Very promising with a lot of progress. Those
That's
are my
nice. That's very nice, Amir. Thank you. And Gary, now the question or the challenge is even bigger for you because you represent Aleph Farm, but I would like you to choose one Israeli company that you like best and why.
Choosing one is very difficult. I come from the protein industry. I had 20 years of experience with Solbar, who also offered soy proteins into the Korean market across all food and feed categories. And so if I look at proteins as such, I think the alternative protein players, such as InnovaPro in the chickpeas, is going to make it a very, very important contribution to bringing other protein sources, other plant-based protein sources into the market.
Great, thank you, Gary. And Nir, back to you. Even more challenging as an NGO that looks at the entire industry to choose one, but please, you're welcome to choose one or two shortly.
Yeah, I'm totally going to dodge the question, unfortunately, and say that we have about 20 companies under the radar in Israel, besides 35 or 40 that are known. So I welcome you to talk to us at GFI to learn more about what's going on. And maybe I'll recommend what they can look not only at plant-based and cultivated meat companies, but as Amir mentioned, fermentation, I think is going to be growing very rapidly in the next few years. Companies like Imaginary, like Remilk and others seem to be very, very promising.
Great, thank you, Nir. And last question, and also any summary notes that you may have, and we will start with you, Gary. I would like to ask for your summary notes as well as commenting on the issue of how Korean companies might be able to work ideally with Israeli companies. What are the best practices and the ideal ways to do business together? Gary, you have so much experience here in Korea, so maybe you can give us your insights.
First, also in relation to the last question, I would like to also emphasize the vertical integration from ag to food and the science. And we're still in the area of proteins and plant-based proteins, as well as the cultivated meats and so on, are still looking at new technologies ahead in the pipeline, from the breeding of the seeds to CRISPR technologies, which are going to have a great impact. And I know that these kinds of technologies are also being developed in Korea in a big way. And the idea is that how do you take such state-of-art science and take it, quote unquote, down to the level of food and make it applicable to the what people want and can eat. And I believe that the science exists in Korea. I believe that the expectations for tasty food exist in Korea. And I have a great confidence that we will also find great collaborations with Korean companies on this.
Great, thank you, Gary. Moving to you, Nir, what will be your recommendations on best practices for Korean companies to work with the Israeli alternative protein industry?
Yeah, I would say very practically, if you want to work in Israel and get introduced, please contact GFI. It's what we do. We're a non-profit, we don't charge for it, and we will be able to give you an introduction of the Israeli ecosystem. I put here in the link, in the chat, a link to our website with a mapping of all of the Israeli ecosystem. And I will later on share some email addresses for you to be able to contact. Please do so.
Great, and Amir, back to you. Besides contacting everyone here and engaging directly with the innovation hubs and the companies, what other best practices you might recommend to work with Israel?
So Nir mentioned that Israel is a great pilot place for innovation and new technologies, but it's only a pilot place. It's a pilot market. It's not a big market. Israeli startups typically immediately think about bigger market abroad, but the natural way of thinking, because of maybe cultural barriers, to go to big markets in Europe and in the US, and less about in the early stage, they think less about East Asia and markets in that area, it's more difficult to a new startup to even comprehend how to go about that. So my suggestion is, or recommendation is that if you find this interesting, you have to make yourself visible. You have to make the Israeli startups notice that you want to work with them. You have to bring it to the attention of the local startups that, hey, we are from South Korea, we have a market, we are interested in what you're doing, and we want to collaborate, because this will not come, I don't expect this to come from Israeli startups in the early stages. Say, hey, South Korea is our first market, let's go there. It's too complicated. They go close, they go to, I don't know, the UK, Germany, or France, or to the US because of the size of the market. So my recommendation is be active. Contact Nir, contact myself, contact other organizations. Make us know that you're interested and that you have a value-added proposition to those startups, and work with us on creating this collaboration.
Excellent. I would like, this is the end of our panel. I would like to thank very much to all of you, Amir Zaidman from The Kitchen, Nir Goldstein from GFI, and obviously Gary Brenner from Aleph Farms. We will now move to the section right away, without further ado, to our panelists, or to our companies. First one will be Mr. Simon Fried from Meatech. Simon, are you with us? Simon? So, Simon, great.
Hello.
So the floor is yours, and you can share your presentation if you have one, and start right away. So the floor is yours.
Just a moment, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your attention and patience as I pull this up on screen. So just as a quick check, is that now appearing on everybody's screen? In a,
yeah, just put it on full screen, please.
That's okay. Is that now in full screen mode?
Not yet.
Oh, that's interesting, because it ought to be here. Well, I can't quite see why that would be the case, but we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I guess you can start with that, and
we'll see where it goes.
Will be
exactly.
Yeah, great.
Right. So welcome to Meatech, and as we've heard from the panel here, Meatech is one of the few companies in Israel. I think it's very exciting to have this community of startups in Israel working on alternative proteins, cultured meat, and also bringing in all of the other ecosystem technologies that Israel has to offer, whether it's in the incubation space or academia, and also quite a lot of collaboration. I think there's an expression I came across when I was working in Silicon Valley for a while, which is very common in the world of electronics and that sort of tech, where you talk about pre-competitive collaboration. And I think this is the phase that this sort of industry is in, where there's a great deal of excitement, but we need to be collaborating and working together. And many of these companies need partnerships and are actively looking for collaborations. And in Asia as well, we certainly would be very keen to. So Meatech is a listed company. So it is a startup, but it's a publicly traded company. The company recently completed a listing on the NASDAQ exchange, which means, unfortunately, that the next slide you see is going to be one of some legalese. And you should be seeing that, and this is really because we're talking about things of the future and intentions of the company. So as a quick overview, Meatech has recently become a group. We started out as one company based here in Israel. There's recently been an acquisition, so we now have activities in Belgium as well. And so we've collected quite a large, and we believe leading R&D team in the area of cell-based meats. And also in terms of the scientific advisors that we're working with. We have a couple of technologies we're working on. Actually, the Belgian subsidiary is now focused on cultured fat production. and I'll introduce how cultured fats can be really important to the plant-based world, at least in the near term, and then obviously wider in the future. And also another thing that's important to mention about Meatech is that we're not seeking to be a brand on the end shelf. We're developing technologies that we're looking to license to manufacturing partners who will be making their own products and taking their own cultured products to market. So we see ourselves as very much an enabler. And in order to progress with that sort of business model, we're obviously very keen to have discussions with, if there are any in the audience, companies from the food production space or FMCG brands, retail companies, and obviously finance as well, with a view to seeing what one might be able to do in a place like Korea. I'm sure, as you'll understand, regulation is very local, and some things actually, whilst these are global solutions, there are local nuances which are much helped by having local partners and discussions. So yes, we're very much part of the cellular agriculture space, what we're calling Meat 2.0. It's essentially replacing the traditional bioreactor, which is the cow, with a slightly more modern and efficient, and as we also heard, of course, more sustainable and ethical process as well. The idea being that this has got all of the advantages for industry that I'll touch on in a moment, that actually make this not just a question of sustainability and ethics. Obviously, they're crucial, but there has to be a business case for this kind of technology as well. And this is why we feel that licensing technologies can really help to accelerate adoption of cellular agriculture. So what we're seeing here is that we're developing a B2B process, a sort of vision of a factory of the future. And this is something that requires very, very different inputs to what we're familiar with from a traditional farm. If you think about where farming traditionally happens, it happens where you have the natural resources for it. It happens, if you're talking about cattle, it happens in Texas, it happens in Argentina. But it doesn't very often happen in Singapore at scale, or in Hong Kong, or in the UAE, and also not in Korea in the same way. And this is very much because your agricultural capability is connected to where you happen to find yourself and the resources, the land resources that you have. This sort of manufacturing approach, this factory of the future, really fundamentally changes the relationship between land and agriculture, between the kinds of natural resources that you need, and also what are the key success factors. To run what is a technology factory requires the ability to manage technology and abilities and core competencies that are very different to traditional agricultural capabilities. And so we're expecting that this is going to have some fantastic potential to change and impact on the agricultural industry, and obviously downstream on products and customers, because Meat 2.0 has these tremendous business potential advantages. So we see sustainability, of course, but changes to supply chain. How do products get from A to B? Where is the meat manufactured? It's going to be closer to customers. They'll have more responsive manufacturing. They have just-in-time manufacturing. So it's not just the sustainability of the process of making cultured meat, but it's actually the downstream impact on supply chains and how things go to market that has potential to also have further impact on supply chain. But also, as a logistics person or a shelf life person, you can expect cultured meat to make many of the aspects of managing food supply from a security and a safety perspective to get much easier, as well as introducing some exciting new products. So this is the context that we really believe that industry has great interest and cause to do this, in addition, of course, to the more societal ones. The industry here is going to be something that is very, very large. We see it growing already with the sort of parallel plant-based business. But specifically to Meatech, we're focusing on two key areas. On the one hand, yes, we're a cell-based meat company working currently now in Israel. We're working on bovine cells, so producing beef cells from stem cells, whereas in Belgium, we're now working on avian cells, so primarily at the moment chicken, but also some work on goose and duck. And this is very central to Meatech. Our goal is to have a wide offering of cell types. Of course, we look at companies as our customers, and those sorts of companies wish to have a wide offering to offer their customers further downstream. And for that, we are looking to have an offering that includes beef, an offering that includes chicken, and perhaps others as we continue expanding. The other area of focus, and this is quite unique, we believe, to Meatech, at least at this stage, is we have a dedicated team working on the hardware side as well to introduce what we call tissue engineering or 3D printing of meat. Now, there are a few other companies working on these sorts of technologies. We have a dedicated team working on this. And the rationale behind the 3D printing, of course, is that it can change and improve the way in which you bring those ingredients together. So maybe you do have cultured cells, but there is obviously a difference between the experience of eating a meatball or a chicken nugget and perhaps eating a steak with that sort of juiciness and fibers that that might be necessary, we believe at least, to convince some of those flexitarians to perhaps have slightly fewer steaks and have a different kind of steak in the future. Obviously, plum. Yes.
סליחה, התקבלה בקשה מהקהל שתדבר קצת יותר לאט ושתציג שקפים, אם אפשר. תודה.
אז אני לא מציג שקפים?
לפחות אנחנו לא יכולים לראות אותך, אנחנו עדיין על הדיסקליימרס, אז זה לא נראה שאתה זז.
עכשיו כן?
כן, עכשיו כאילו אתה זז, אבל זה היה כל הזמן דיסקליימרס.
כן, זה מאוד מוזר, כי זו, אני עברתי 4. Apologies. So I just heard that there was no transmission of the slides. So I'll quickly repeat the ones that you haven't seen because these were, I thought, on screen. They were for me. So the focus here is on using bioreactors to replace the animals and the livestock in the production process. And what we're doing here at Meatech is we're focused on developing our vision of a factory. What you see here now on screen, as I initially described, is an area where you're producing cells. They might be muscle cells, they might be fat cells, they might be chicken, they might be beef, depending on what any operator of such a factory wants to do. And this is what I meant when this kind of facility will be built, not in the traditional agricultural places like Texas or Argentina. They could be built much closer to customers. They can also, of course, tap into renewable energy sources, and they can be an entirely different approach to the supply chain. And this is essentially what we were talking about when we see these advantages. They boil down into sustainability and supply chain advantages, food safety, security, shelf life. All of these flow from moving the production to more practical locations, perhaps optimizing the supply chain as a whole beyond that impact on the environment. And then when I was referring to the core R&D of the company, we were talking there initially about how our focus is on scaling up the cell-based processes. In Belgium, we're doing that for avian cells. In Israel, we're doing that with bovine beef cells. And alongside that, we're developing our a proprietary printing systems, which you can see in the video running in the background there. The idea being that bringing those biomaterials, bringing those cells together in a different type of structure allows one to make different products. And certainly we have some people that are looking for a very rich steak, perhaps a lot of fat in their products. And some people are looking for perhaps more basic products, perhaps a little bit leaner. They might be on a diet. So there are ways you can use 3D printing to create a much wider range of end product. It might allow you to customize. Imagine maybe for health reasons, or also for seasonal reasons. If I'm a manufacturer, I might want to make something different in the spring to in the summer. Demand changes around the 4th of July, might be quite different to what you expect to be selling at Christmas time in the US. And using bioprinting can allow you to deal with changes in demand much more flexibly than a traditional supply chain. Certainly what we saw when we were following the news last year in the States was tremendous disruption to the food supply chain, particularly for meat, because this is such a difficult logistical challenge. Very long supply chains, very complicated to stop. You can't really pause them. This type of facility, you can. So just as a manufacturer, it's a very exciting prospect to have much more control and proximity to customers. So as we describe the technologies that we're using, essentially on the one hand, like several other cultured meat companies, there's this process of collecting a cell from an animal without harming the animal, and one can use this cell to grow many more of them. And it's an exponential process. And this is really what we find so fascinating about cultured meat as a whole, is it's an exponential process. You can double your production volume every day. There are not many places where you have that potential for scalability and to achieve plenty. And this is one approach to do that, by going from those cells, getting the fat and the muscle cells. And then it's a question of what are we going to do with it? Now, the easiest thing to do is to mix them up and to blend them and perhaps make nuggets or burgers. And these are the slightly more commoditized and perhaps cheaper products that we see in stores today. So to compete with them, obviously price is very important, but we're seeing that these sorts of things are certainly making their way to market, and pricing is coming down. We recently made an acquisition here at Meatech of a company in Belgium, and their focus is on including cultured fat in products. So if you imagine how difficult it is, and we'll be hearing from Redefine Meat shortly, at how complex it is to use plant-based ingredients to make alternative proteins. And there are many things that one can do. One of the things that it's possible to consider doing in this sort of space is to have a hybrid type product where you can use animal sourced but cell-based fats, for example, to change the flavor profiles and the mouth texture and mouthfeel of certain products. And this is something that we're doing in our activities in Belgium. You can see there's some nuggets that have had many of the plant ingredients replaced by some cultured fat, making actually for a potentially simpler manufacturing process, and also a more flavorsome and meaty flavor. So this is one way one can imagine using cultured meat or cultured fat in this particular case. The alternative approach, and this is where you say, fine, we're not going to just mix these cultured ingredients into a patty or a burger, which is one route. The other is we're really going to take this to what we see as the next level and generate tissue structures. It's a more complicated process, requires more sophisticated use of those materials, and is going to take longer to have ready for the market. But here, taking those same fat or muscle cells, we have a process where we have to turn those into inks, like you'd expect would go into any printer. So we need inks there that can contain the fat or the muscle cells. We need inks that can allow them to create a structure to keep those cells in place. And then the tissue can start to form after printing. And over a few weeks of incubation, you go from having maybe one of those simpler, more processed products to something that is more similar to the kind of steak and higher end, more premium products that one sees in the marketplace today. So we're on this journey where, from a Meatech perspective, we think it's very important that hybrid products come to market soon. We've seen that these have received regulatory approval in Singapore already. And depending on, I think there's a little bit of a race now between regulators to see who can be the most proactive. And this requires engaging locally. And we're very keen to engage locally in Korea as well, to be able to introduce those hybrid products. And then over time, as the production costs come down and the technologies become more mature, to start looking at the other areas of fully cultured meat products or fully 3D printed steak tissue like end products. So these are the general directions that we're looking at. And in order to do that, we have these activities in Israel around beef and developing those printing systems. We have the activities in Belgium, at the heart of Europe, right next to Brussels, developing solutions based on avian cells for a different category of end product, all of which we're working to have be compatible with our printing technologies as well. And we're looking to continue our expansion and evaluating ways in which we can meet our customers' expectations in the future of having a broader range, perhaps aquaculture or fish, to add to the process. So at the end of it, we're presenting a B2B process where we can offer technologies that relate to growing those cells for one category of products, printing them into what we believe are perhaps the holy grail, the most exciting, but it'll take a little bit longer to get there. And in the interim, we're looking to start these sorts of contacts in localized areas in order that one can get traction and bring these products to market as soon as possible, as soon as regulators permit, and obviously as soon as the technology is fully mature. So thank you very much, and welcome to come and visit. But travel isn't quite open yet.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, you have one question from the audience. Someone asked about, doesn't incubation make any weight increase?
So the incubation phase is primarily about getting the cells. I can perhaps go back to that so we can have it on screen as I describe it. But the incubation phase essentially is not so much adding mass as allowing the cells to coalesce and to join together. So they are printed essentially ready. The mass doesn't really change very much. It's much more about allowing them to coalesce and set in place and use that structure for them to get a form and a shape in accordance with the instructions to the printer. So you can load up a file, print the materials, but the incubation is about creating the intracellular matrix. So really making sure that you have a solid fibrous structure. So when you cut it, you have that experience of cutting through fibers and a piece of tissue.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, you have a few more questions in the chat. So please go over, and if you can just please answer through the chat box.
My pleasure. I'll be right over in the chat section immediately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. So 다음은 3D 식품 프린팅 기업이 Redefine 밑에 아담 라하브 님께서 발표를 시작해 주도록 하겠습니다. 질문 있으시면 Q&A 세션으로 Q&A 박스로 남겨주시면 저희가 질문을 대신해서 제가 전달하고 답변을 드리도록 하겠습니다. Adam, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Just let me know that it is properly showed. Can you see my presentation in full screen mode?
See, Adam, we can see the presentation.
Excellent. So I will start. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to present to the audience. And we definitely, as many of the panelists and previous presenters mentioned, look at Korea specifically and Asia in general as a key market for alternative protein and specifically meat alternative. I will use the next 10 to 15 minutes to present you with Redefine Meat and what we are doing. And I hope that at the end, everything will be clear. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them through the chat or later on via follow-ups. So at Redefine Meat, what we do is we make meat better than any animal. And basically, as you heard the whole presentation or session, and you all know, the food industry and specifically the meat industry is a broken industry, but a very, very large and profitable one. And meat is 1.5 trillion US dollars out of the total food industry. And beef specifically, which is the market that Redefine Meat is focusing on, it currently is 500 billion US dollar of one of the most polluting industry exists. I will run through this section because we spent most of the panel discussing the industry's problems and some of the potential solutions. But basically, there are 1 billion cows specifically for meat, consuming more water and more land than all humanity combined, and polluting more than the whole transportation sector together. And this is definitely something that it is not sustainable for the long term. But more importantly, for the sake of this specific session, creates a huge market opportunity of one of the fastest growing segments in the food industry. And there are different analysis and market sizing forecast available today. What is common to all of them is that there will be a massive growth in the meat alternative market, which will led not by vegans and vegans or vegetarians, but by flexitarians, which are the fastest growing community or consumer segment inside the food tech industry. But in order to attend this opportunity or even overachieve it, there is something missing, and that's the ability of the food industry to produce complex products. To simplify a very, very technical discussion on how meat alternatives, plant-based meat alternatives are produced today, at the end, everything has to run through an industrial mixer or served as it goes out of the extrusion, which allows basically only homogeneous products, chicken alternative and minced meat alternative. And in the meat industry, minced meat is actually the smallest part of the market, as opposed to a lot of other markets. In meat, the largest segment is the highest and premium segment. So 80% of the market value is a whole meat or whole muscle meat, which cannot be attained by existing technology. And this is why we developed and now scaling up and commercializing later this year the perfect alternative steak. And what do we mean by the perfect alternative steak? 0 animal-based ingredients, true high-quality meat experience. So really aiming from product management, definitions, flavors, texture, sensory experience for people that love meat and not for necessarily the vegans and vegetarians. And obviously, as I open my presentation, much better for the environment and for our planet. And the way we do it is by applying proprietary multidisciplinary technological approach of 3 layers. The first one is an industrial printer that we developed, which uses a process we developed that takes our plant-based formulations, which I will touch in a minute, and apply them and texturize them based on a 3D model that we developed. The formulations are plant-based muscle, which is a combination of several proteins, water, and natural colors and flavors. Plant-based fat, which is emulsion of plant-based fat, water, and some secret sauce. And the blood, which is practically 95% water with colors and natural colors and flavors, which used mainly for the juiciness of the meat. We studied meat for the last 2.5 years, and we translate not the biological structure of meat, but the sensorical experience of meat, what your senses, your mouth, your teeth, your nose while biting through the meat and tearing the muscle, and then the liquid comes out first, and then the intermuscular fat goes around your mouth. We built this experience into a 3D file that the machine uses to construct the meat out of the formulation. And this technology is patented with 5 patents that we already submitted. This technology allows us to innovate on the business model and supply chain as well. So in meat, not only not only the product, the cow, I'll say, it's not even the product, it's the cow, or the way we treat it and use it is problematic, but the supply chain as well. After you grow a cow for, on average, 2 years, you slaughter it and throw as waste between 30 to 50%, and then you have additional 10 to 15% waste along the supply chain. And even in the supermarket, they throw their highest priced product, meat, they throw to the garbage between 10 to 12% of waste in the retailers and supermarkets. And by converting the meat industry from animal-based to technology-based, and it allows to get the production closer to the consumer and work directly with meat distributors, which will have the machine on site to produce meat, tapping into their supply chain and reaching the food service segment, and working with grocery stores to reach consumers. And by that, not only improving the way we manufacture meat, but where, and reducing the waste and answering seasonality and mass customization of the products per country or region. We grow quite dramatically, already 55 people in the team, 13 engineers, 5 PhDs. We're now building the operational team, building a pilot factory with massive capacity here in Israel, and planning to commercialize the product in July. When we started almost 3 years ago, we had to do most of the things ourselves, but now there is, as mentioned earlier by many of the presenters, a very strong ecosystem formed, and some are mentioned here, which are very closely related to us, but obviously we are in contact and relationship with most of the players in the industry. On the top, you can see our main investors. We're working closely and very strategically with Givaudan on on developing our flavors. We're cooperating with the Technion and supported by the IIA, which was mentioned as well, and gives us an amazing support to companies in our field and our stage. As most of the people involved in the industry knows, and I'm sure the other companies you will hear today will confirm, what we do is quite amazing and quite interesting for the media and most of the people. And we managed and happy to share several of our latest achievements and PRs. For example, our work with some of the leading chefs in Israel, or a food truck event we held under the COVID-19 limitation when the rest of the food service market was closed. We managed to take a food truck and served more than 1,000 dishes to 600 paying customers, which was very exciting for us. Here you can see the meat cut, the meat alternative, both the whole cut, which is what we print. We do not manufacture a single steak, but looking on the whole cut, similar to the way the industry used to work, and some more culinary application using our Redefine meat whole cuts. We do have minced meat products as well, based on the learnings, the extensive experiments and learnings we've made in our rapid testing and rapid development approach delivered by our digital technology, we enable to develop a very, very tasty, meaty, juicy minced meat as well, that we are launching as part of our overall meat portfolio. And I will summarize or finish with 2 out of 4 very short videos. We are now presenting in several locations. One of them is the Paris Innovation Center. Hopefully that when the COVID-19 situation worldwide will improve and we start feeling that in Israel today, you will be able to visit Israel. So first of all, you're always welcome to set in advance and visit us and meet the team and see the labs and factory and taste the meat. And if you find yourself visiting the Paris Innovation Center, the Paris Center in the Innovation Show, you will find few more videos like this there. And I'll show these 2 short videos, and then if you have, I'll be open to answer any question. Thank you very much. That is it from my side. We are interested in collaborating both on go-to-market, research, and investment. If relevant to one of you in the audience, feel free to contact me after the presentation and we'll continue the discussion.
Thank you, Adam. So actually, we don't have a few questions, but we will move to the next company, and then I will translate in English and then let you know about it.
No problem. Thank you very much.
몇 가지 질문이 들어왔는데요. 사실 시간이 좀 지체된 관계로 다음 기업으로 넘어가고 마지막에 제가 말씀을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 다음은 네, 다음은 슈퍼밋에서 발표를 해 주시도록 하겠습니다. Ido, floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Ido. I'm the CEO and founder of SuperMeat. I'm honored to be here, and I'll be telling you about a company which is a cultivated poultry company. So just to make sure that you can see my screen.
Yes, Ido, we can see it.
Great, thank you. So following the incredible presentation that were given today, I will try and focus more on the industrial and business aspect of what we're doing and where we intend to go in the next few years. So the way we see the cultivated meat industry and following on what Nir mentioned in the panel, we don't see ourselves as an alternative protein, but rather as an alternative production method. And I think Simon from Meatech also articulated this very, very well, them being a B2B company, that what we're here to do is enable the industry, the meat industry, that would provide them an efficient and sustainable technology to produce the same meat, the same animal-based protein. And I think in that we differ than alternative products and proteins like pea-based and soy-based. We are producing meat protein that would allow manufacturers to produce the same meat products and brands that everyone loves to eat. So we've been focused on poultry, and we've been in this industry for quite some time. We've been one of the first companies in the space. And just to clarify, all the images that you will see in this presentation, except for the more traditional industry ones, are from our facility and of our products. So why even focus on chicken? So chicken is a very interesting category. First of all, it's about to become the world's largest meat sector, and in terms of numbers, because it's the highest consumed land animals in terms of numbers, over 60 billion animals are consumed yearly in terms of poultry. It's also a very high risk type of animal. Most of the antibiotics are fed to chickens 3 times more than beef and some other cattle, and that makes it one of the most high risk areas in terms of meat production. Also, it has a very high level of contaminants, and as a consequence of that, health hazards potential. But if we look at the cultivated meat industry, and I think, you know, hearing the company's great presentations today, I will try and talk about where we are as an industry and what we're planning to do in the near and long future. So I would say that there are quite a few companies around the world working on this, but probably not more than 15 to 20 companies who are already working on commercializing and scaling up the processes. So being one of these companies, I can tell you our perspective and where we're at. And the timeline that I'm sharing is very similar to timelines that I've shared by other leading companies in the space. So we've currently established our production processes. You can see in the background our pilot facility in Israel, which is basically based on fermentation. Like mentioned, it's an exponential based technology. What that means is that we can very efficiently produce the meat mass. Just to give you an idea, a 1,000-liter bioreactor, which we have in our pilot facility, can produce several hundred kilograms per week of meat, and that's the size of a large refrigerator. So the potential is immense, and also the potential in terms of saving resources. So we're at a point where we have our pilot production facility operational for over a year now, and the work that we're doing and the main challenge that this industry has is basically scaling up and reducing the cost in that process to an extent that would allow you to actually achieve the cost and commercial viability that is relevant for this space. Just to share some of what we've been doing in this regard. So our approach from the start was in order to try and bypass some of the main issues of scaling up and industrialization, we developed a technology that was actually based on existing infrastructure and on existing fermentation technology, which basically allows us to utilize existing facilities of fermentation around the world to produce the meat products. We basically come in with our cell platform, with the chicken cells or other poultry cells that we have, and provided with our nutrient, our formula of cell feed and process, but we can use the existing infrastructure. And that is something that we believe is very, very beneficial when looking at scaling up and expanding rapidly. In terms of there's a lot to talk about the platform and about the potential of that platform and the robustness. As I mentioned, we've been in the space from the start, so it's not that long. The industry is about 5 years long, 5.5 years old, but it gave us enough time to test and validate our platform and our production processes. So we feel very confident in the stage that we're at, and that we're able to deliver a very high quality type of both manufacturing process as well as products. So after looking at the manufacturing process, what is also very important to look at is what you're actually able to produce out of that process. So like I mentioned, what we're producing is not something that is an alternative protein, alternative to meat, but actually the meat tissues themselves. So what we've done some analytics, both on the sensorial level, that showed that the volatiles, that the different compounds that are released are similar and equivalent to what you would find in conventionally produced chicken. And this is, by the way, some photos from our R&D process where you see 100% cultured meat without any additives, without anything. So this is just the meat that we produce. These are applications that you see. I think that, as I mentioned, all the images that you see in the background are all from our products and our facility. What we see here is a nutritional profile analysis that we've done, showing a very high similarity with conventionally produced chicken on all parameters, and also on the PDCAS, which is the protein digestibility level, which actually scored a higher score with our meat products. Also on the amino acid level, there's a very high similarity with conventionally produced meat. Obviously, there's always some variability between specimen, but aside from that, you see basically an equivalence to conventionally produced meat. I think one of the last thing that is interesting to mention in terms of our latest activity is that we've introduced a platform that we've called the Chicken, which allows basically it's a plant to fork facility where people can come in and experience meat products, the cultivated meat products, and see and observe the manufacturing process happening before their eyes. And in this way, basically create a very wholesome and transparent experience for the consumers that actually allows them also to educate on how their meat is manufactured, which we see as a growing trend and a growing interest of the consumer to both have very fresh and sustainable type of products, but also have awareness of where their product and how and what came into their product. And in Supermeat and other cultured meat companies would have the ability to provide this. So just to close off, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, in terms of our roadmap and our work and how we see collaborations with the world and with Korea specifically. So we are currently working on setting up our first commercial plants. The first ones are going to be launched in 2022. And we are looking and working on forming commercial relationships in regards to both areas, both in terms of manufacturing and distributing the product and meat applications, as well as in terms of supply chain. One of our core focuses and strategies is regarding the supply chain. We see that as incredibly important and also something that is a huge value that the cultivated meat industry can bring to the table, because it can create a very local industry and very local sourcing of the ingredients, of the raw materials that are used as the cell feed, which is essentially proteins, sugars, fats, amino acids. So what we've done is where we launch our manufacturing plants, we have formed strategic relationships with ingredient sourcing partners in order to secure a supply chain and create an ecosystem that actually is very local and supportive and not and creates a higher food security process. Yeah, so this is the presentation from my end. The images that you see are from the chicken platform that I mentioned that we introduced, where you can see some visitors tasting the products and the production facility in the background. Be happy to answer any questions if there are.
Thank you, Ido. Thank you. There is a few questions, but before asking for question, I'll just speaking in Korean just a few seconds. 저희가 지금 폴을 진행하고 있습니다. 혹시 오늘 금일 발표한 기업들과 미팅을 원하시거나 질문이 있으시면, 사실 저희가 제한된 시간에 하다 보니까 다 질문들을 대답을 해드리기가 좀 어려워가지고요. 혹시 질문 있으시면 저희한테 제 이메일을 주셔도 좋고요. 아니면 폴에다가 적으셔서 저희한테 전달해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 사실 저희가 여러 가지 질문 중에 몇 가지만 좀 영어로 말씀을 드리고 좀 답변을 드리도록 하겠습니다. So Ido, there is some questions. So some company asking that super meat is emphasized of the cost to reduce and the scale of economy, but all the things, your main technology is by your development. And also, what will be the special, what is it? What is the details of the, yeah, first of all, just please answer all the technology by yourself or with our corporations things.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, actually, it's also harder to translate it.
I will try, Ido, I will try to explain. I think the question deals with whether the technology is owned by you and developed by your company, or are you cooperating with other entities as well?
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, it's completely owned by us. The technology was developed internally within the company. It's a private company, and we developed the entire technology. Our approach in terms of partnering is we are the manufacturers of the meat, and we're happy to be suppliers of the raw meat material. We're able to provide different types of raw material. We're able to produce basically any type of poultry meat tissue, from fat to muscle, to connective tissue and other parts, and we're happy to supply that in different forms, whether it's minced or not, to the industry to develop and introduce their products to the industry.
Thank you very much, Ido. So maybe I will translate some more question to you later on. So 오늘 많이 바쁘신 와중에도 참석해 주셔서 너무 감사합니다. 그래서 그 발표 자료를 요청하신 분들이 좀 있으신데요. 사실 오늘 이 세션은 녹화된 파일로 저희가 온라인 세미나가 끝나면 녹화된 파일과 함께 이스라엘 기업들 발표 자료는 저희가 취합해가지고 다시 이메일로 전달을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 혹시 더 궁금하신 내용 있으시거나 이스라엘 기업과 개별 미팅 원하시면 저희한테 좀 이메일로 남겨주시면 제가 개별적으로 연락드리고 스케줄을 잡도록 하겠습니다. So thank you everybody. So we're gonna finish at this moment. So for all the other issue, I will send you an email. So thank you very much. 오늘 참석해 주셔서 너무 감사합니다.